My name is Kendra Stanton. I'm 34 years old, and I price disasters for a living. Last July, my brother put his 2 children in a taxi and sent them to my house. A house I had quietly sold 4 months earlier. I had said no 3 times, in writing. Darren hit send on one last text, switched his phone to airplane mode, and walked up a cruise ship gangway with a drink voucher in his hand. The taxi carried my niece and nephew through a summer thunderstorm and left them on a stranger's porch. The man who answered that door made one single phone call. What that call set in motion: the squad car, the caseworker, the handcuffs at the Atlanta airport, and the piece of paper my own mother slid across her kitchen table, my family never saw coming. Honestly, neither did I. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where we share family stories about respect, boundaries, and the quiet strength it takes to hold them when the people you love push hardest. If your no has ever been treated like the start of a negotiation, this story is for you. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from today, and be sure to subscribe, because you will want to hear how this ends. I work on the 19th floor of a glass tower in Midtown Atlanta at a company called Meridian Assurance Group. My job is simple to explain and hard to do. I look at something people love: a house, a bridge, a business, and I calculate exactly how it fails. Storms, lawsuits, bad wiring, worse decisions. I put a number on catastrophe before it arrives. Clients pay serious money for that. My family got it free for 3 decades, and they never even knew they were my biggest account. I was the keeper of the spare keys. I was the midnight airport pickup. I was the loan with no due date, and the guest room that was never requested, only announced. When my father's transmission died, my savings fixed it. When Darren's card got declined at a pharmacy, mine didn't. I handled Grandma's insurance appeal, my mom's property tax dispute, and every Thanksgiving turkey since I was 25. That wasn't love, exactly. It was infrastructure. Nobody thanks a bridge. They just drive across it, and they get very offended the day it charges a toll. Here is the thing about being the reliable one: reliability reads as consent. Say yes enough times, and your yes stops being a gift, it becomes a standing order. And your no? In my family, no was never an answer. It was an opening bid. Say it, and the negotiation simply began. Softer voices, guilt with a casserole on top. My mother's favorite speech about what families do: I'll be fair. Nobody twisted my arm. I kept catching them because catching things felt like being needed, and being needed was the closest I ever got to being seen. It took 2 children on a stranger's porch to teach me the difference between those two things. The rules in my family were never written down. They didn't need to be. I learned mine at 12, standing at the front door with my brother's inhaler in my hand because Darren, 15 and grinning, had forgotten it again on game day. My mother kissed my forehead and called me her little manager. It was the nicest thing she said to me that year. Her name is Paula, and she learned the rules from her own family. She had a baby brother, my Uncle Teddy, and she carried him like luggage for 40 years. Rent, bail money once, 3 Christmases where his gifts came from her card. She told those stories the way other women show off wedding china. I never once let him fall, she'd say, chin high. Teddy never learned to land either, but that part never made the story. My father, Frank, was an electrician for 30 years and silent for most of them. He believed peace meant agreeing with my mother a half-second faster than the argument could start. And Darren was the fun one, quick with a joke, first on the dance floor, the kind of charm that makes waitresses forgive him. He never carried anything heavy in his life, because every time he reached for weight, 4 hands beat him to it, and 2 of them were mine. He grew into a man who was 37 and had never once heard a no that stuck. That's not a personality. That's a diet. You become what your family feeds you, and they fed him rescue after rescue while I was fed the word responsible like it was dessert. People ask why I kept picking up the tab for a grown man. For a long time, the honest answer had 4 bedrooms and an address. I bought 4128 Maplewood Court in Smyrna when I was 28. $238,000, 6 years of brutal saving, A lawn I mowed myself the first evening just to feel it under my shoes. That house was my proof. Proof I existed as a person and not just a function. For about a year, it was mine. Then my mother asked for a key, for emergencies. Then Darren copied the key, for convenience. Then the guest room became the kids' room, and my Saturdays became drop-off windows nobody scheduled with me, and my backyard hosted 3 birthday parties I learned about from the invitations. Every protest got the same soft answer. It's family, Kendra. Last November broke me. Darren and Brianna's water heater flooded their place, which was real, and somehow the repair took 9 days that landed exactly on Thanksgiving, which was not. 5 people moved into my house. I cooked for 11, slept on my own couch, and found my study turned into a wrapping station. On day 6, I said quietly that I needed my house back by the weekend. My mother didn't even look up from her coffee. A house that big? For one person? God gave you extra so you could share. Everyone laughed. Not mean laughter. Worse, comfortable laughter. The sound a family makes when the arrangement suits everyone but the person paying for it. I stood in my own kitchen holding a pan I'd bought, in a house I'd bought, and understood that I didn't own this place in any way that counted. They had annexed it. Somewhere between the 9th load of someone else's laundry and the sofa I slept on under my own roof, my anger burned down to something quieter and far more useful. I started doing math. In January, I called my friend Terry, a realtor with a gift for discretion, and said the words out loud for the first time. I want to sell. Off market. No sign in the yard. She didn't ask why. Within 3 weeks she brought me a buyer. Colonel Darnell Reeves, retired, United States Marine Corps, 61 years old, 32 years of service, widowed 4 years. He wanted a quiet street and a porch that faced east. He offered clean and close to asking, and we signed in mid-March. $412,000, keys in an envelope, my whole secret in a manila folder. I moved into a condo in Decatur, 25 minutes and one entire life away. I told my family the house was getting work done, roof, pipes, mold remediation. I kept it vague and boring, which is the best camouflage there is. Nobody checked. Of course nobody checked. You don't inspect a resource. You just assume it will be there. Like water, like weather, like me. My mail forwarded. My Sundays happened at my parents' place in Marietta, neutral ground. Months passed and not one member of my family noticed I no longer lived at the address they'd been using like a hotel. At the closing table, Colonel Reeves asked me exactly one question that wasn't on a form. Anything I should know about the house? I looked at this stranger with his steady hands and his flag pin, and I told him the truest thing I owned. My family believes this house belongs to them. If anyone ever shows up, you don't owe them anything. He held my eyes for a moment, then nodded once. Understood. I drove to Decatur feeling weightless, like I'd finally moved my life out of a flood zone. I should have known better. It's my job to know better. Risk doesn't disappear. It just changes address slower than I did. Spring was the first season of my adult life that belonged to me. I drank coffee on my little balcony on Sunday mornings and heard nothing but birds and my own thoughts. I registered for the July certification exam, the last box to check before Meridian would make me Director of Risk, a title I'd been quietly building toward for 9 years. I studied at night with my cat, Actuary, asleep on the practice tests. I want to be clear about something, because it matters. I didn't leave those children. Zoe is 9, all elbows and observation, the kind of kid who watches adults the way I watch balance sheets. Caleb is 6 and travels everywhere with a plastic dinosaur named Bruce. I saw them almost every Sunday at my parents' house. I braided Zoe's hair and lost chess games to her on purpose, then lost some, not on purpose. She kept a shoebox of her dad's losing scratch-off tickets. She called it her collection, and she said it so matter-of-factly that nobody but me seemed to hear what it meant. A 9-year-old was already keeping records on her father. I left a building, and I left a job I'd never applied for. I did not leave those kids. The distinction was the whole point, though I didn't know yet how expensive it would be to prove. May was quiet. Early June was quieter. I remember thinking, cautiously, the way you think about a clear sky in hurricane season, that maybe the new arrangement had settled. That maybe distance had done the work confrontation never could. Then, in the middle of June, my phone lit up with Darren's name. My brother never called just to talk. He called the way invoices arrive. He didn't say hello. He said, "Guess who's going to the Bahamas?" Then it all came out in one shiny stream. An anniversary cruise, 7 days, leaving July 12th. Some deal Brianna found that was about to expire. $4,800, non-refundable, already booked. I remember noticing the order of that sentence. Already booked. The plan existed. I was just being notified of my role in it. "So the kids'll stay with you," he said. "You barely have a life anyway." He laughed when he said it. He always laughed when he said things like that, so that objecting would make me the one who couldn't take a joke. I looked at my calendar on the wall. My exam was July 15th. My quarter-end storm models were due the same week. And underneath those facts sat a bigger one, the one I'd been practicing all spring. I said, "No. Just that. No cushion, no apology, no offer to find him a sitter," which was the part of the ritual I'd always performed before. The silence on the line had a texture to it, like a machine that had jammed on a coin it didn't recognize. Then he laughed again. "You always say that first," he said, easy as anything. "It's fine, we'll talk." He hung up cheerful. He genuinely wasn't worried, and I understood why. In 37 years, the word no had never once cost him anything. Why would he believe in it? You don't believe in rain that has never touched you. I sat there with the phone warm in my hand and heard my own pulse, and I made myself a promise that sounded very small and turned out to be enormous. This time, the no was going to mean something, even if I had to hold it with both hands. What followed was 10 days of the family pressure machine, every piston firing. My mother called first. "Family shows up, Kendra. I raised you better than whatever this is." My father didn't call, which was its own kind of message, since his silence always parked itself on her side of the driveway. Aunt Renee texted a prayer hands emoji and the word selfish spelled out in full. Brianna, bless her, sent me a spa itinerary with a note that said, "We so needed this." And I realized with a small chill that she wasn't pressuring me at all. She thought it was settled. Someone had told her it was settled. I answered the only way a risk analyst knows how. Clearly, calmly, and in writing. On June 26th, I texted Darren. "I am not available to watch the kids July 11th through the 19th. Please arrange childcare." On July 1st, after another round of phone charm, I sent it again, longer, with my exam date spelled out. On July 5th, I sent the third and final version, the one I could recite in my sleep now, the one a detective would later read back to me in a voice with no music in it. "I will not be watching Zoe and Caleb. Do not plan around me. Please arrange licensed childcare. This is my final answer." His entire reply was a thumbs-up emoji, one yellow thumb floating under a paragraph it hadn't read. And then, nothing. 6 days of nothing. No calls, no guilt casseroles, no mom. I told myself the machine had finally accepted the coin. But I'd grown up in that house, and some animal part of me knew better and kept pacing. In my family, silence was never peace. Silence was inventory. Before we get to that Saturday morning, let me ask you something. Has your family ever treated your no like the opening bid in a negotiation? How many times did you have to repeat it before they heard you? Twice, 10 times, 30 years? Tell me in the comments, because I read every one of them. And if this story already feels like your story, hit subscribe. You are going to want to see what a thumbs-up emoji looks like inside a police file. Saturday, July 12th, arrived wearing a storm. The forecast had been growling all week. A slow gray system parked over North Georgia, the kind that turns I-285 into a car wash. I didn't care. Saturdays before the exam ran on lockdown rules, coffee at 7, phone in the kitchen drawer, 6 hours of practice problems at my little desk while actuaries supervised from the windowsill. It's the only way I study. You can't price catastrophe with a phone chirping at you. So while the rain started tapping the glass around 9, I was deep in flood zone actuarial tables, feeling, God help me, peaceful. At noon, I closed the laptop, stretched, and opened the drawer. The phone came alive in my hand like something caught. A text from Darren, stamped 7:41 that morning. Kids are in a cab to your place. Boarding now. You're the best, sis. Airplane mode till Nassau. Then a missed call from Brianna's phone at 8:12. Then a voicemail from a number I didn't know. Then 2 missed calls, 40 minutes apart, from a number my phone's caller ID tagged with a label that emptied my lungs, Cobb County Police. I stood in my kitchen in Decatur, in the home none of them had ever seen, and read the text twice more, hoping it would rearrange itself into something survivable. A cab. To my place. Except Darren didn't have my place. He had a memory of my place. He had the only address for me that had ever existed in his universe, because it had never once occurred to him to ask whether my life had moved on. The rain got louder. I pressed play on the voicemail, and a calm, unhurried man's voice I'd heard exactly once before, at a closing table in March, began to speak. I know what happened that morning the way an analyst knows anything, from records, statements, and the account of the one adult in that house who told the truth. At 6:50 a.m. in their kitchen in Austell, Brianna asked Darren the question that should have ended everything. Did Kendra confirm? She never answered my text about the spa. And my brother, zipping a suitcase, said, She's in, she always is. Simple as that. He wasn't lying the way criminals lie, sweating and careful. He was lying the way weather happens, assuming the world would be shaped like his need, because it always had been. The rideshare app was the first thing that told him no. Unaccompanied minors, against policy, account flagged if you try. So he called a cash outfit, City Star Cab, and a driver named Gus pulled up at 7:35. Darren handed him $80 and a promise. Their aunt's at the house. She's expecting them. The older one knows the way. He hugged his kids. I believe he even meant it. Zoe had her backpack and her hand-me-down phone for emergencies. Caleb had his backpack, and Bruce the dinosaur. And here is the detail I keep returning to, the one the detective would later underline in her report without comment. The text to me. Kids are in a cab to your place. Went out at 7:41. The cab left at 7:38. He informed me 3 minutes after the doors closed and the wheels were already rolling, then went dark for a week. That's not forgetting to check. That's making sure the answer can't matter. Even a thumbs-up guy knows the difference between asking and announcing. His flight to Orlando pushed back from the gate at 9:05. By then his children were standing in the rain in front of a door that no longer opened for anyone named Stanton. Zoe told me the ride part herself. Weeks later, in the flat voice she uses for things that scare her. The cab smelled like pine air freshener. Caleb made Bruce walk along the window ledge and narrated the puddles. The rain came on somewhere past the interstate junction, first a drum, then a roar, and Gus turned the wipers up and asked, You kids sure your aunt's home? And Zoe said yes, because her dad had said yes, and 9-year-olds run on their father's certainty, the way houses run on wiring you can't see. She recognized the turn onto Maplewood before the GPS announced it. The magnolia on the corner, the blue mailbox, the backyard she knew had a swing, because I'd hung it for her myself 2 summers ago. This is it, she said, and her stomach did something she didn't have a word for, because the porch furniture was wrong, and there was a little flag by the door that hadn't been there before, and children notice everything and are believed about nothing. Gus took the backpacks out. The rain flattened their hair in the 10 steps from the curb. That hard Georgia rain that soaks a kid before a grown-up can even open an umbrella. Zoe rang the bell to my house. Through the glass she saw a shape coming that was too tall and moved too straight, and behind her the cab's brake lights were already smearing red down the wet street. Gus saw the front door beginning to open, an adult in the frame, close enough for cash fare arithmetic, and pulled away into the storm. The door opened all the way. A tall man with gray hair cropped close looked down at 2 dripping children on his welcome mat. It was not their Aunt Kendra. It was nobody they had ever seen in their lives. Caleb, 6, solve the situation the way 6-year-olds do. He asked the only question that mattered. Where's our Aunt Kendra? Colonel Darnell Reeves, 61, retired after 32 years in the Marine Corps, looked at the wet children, looked at the empty street, and did triage. Later he'd tell me his first 3 thoughts, in order: get them dry, get names, get a responsible adult on a phone. He brought them under the porch roof and came back with 2 towels and, for reasons Caleb still talks about, a sleeve of graham crackers. Then he ran what he called a roll call, kneeling on one knee, voice level. Names. Ages. Where's your dad? Zoe, 9 going on 40, gave it to him straight. Dad and Mom went on a boat. Dad said Aunt Kendra lives here. Aunt Kendra is not answering. This used to be her house because that's her swing in the back. She called her father from her little phone while the colonel watched. Straight to voicemail. The ocean already had him. Or the airplane mode did. She tried her mother. Voicemail. She didn't know her grandparents' number by heart because no one memorizes numbers anymore, and she didn't have mine, because her phone had been set up by her father, and you can guess how much thought he'd given to backup contacts. The colonel stood on the porch of the house I'd sold him and, he told me later, thought about the strange thing the seller had said at closing. My family believes this house belongs to them. If anyone ever shows up, you don't owe them anything. He looked at Zoe wringing rain out of her sleeve and filed that sentence where it belonged. It was a rule about adults. He didn't owe the grown Stantons one single thing. What he owed 2 shivering kids was a dry porch and a decision. Here is what a man does after 32 years of responsibility for other people's children in worse weather than this. He does not shrug and shut the door. He does not load strange kids into his truck and improvise, because he knows exactly how that looks and exactly how wrong it can go. And he does not stand around hoping the problem evaporates. For 20 minutes, by his own account, Colonel Reeves worked the problem on that porch like it was a stalled convoy. Father's phone, dark. Mother's phone, dark. Grandparents, no number. The aunt, no number, though Zoe offered what she had. She does risk. At Meridian. Downtown. He left me the voicemail I would not hear for hours, his voice as calm as a man reading coordinates. And when the 20 minutes were up and every civilian option was exhausted, he did the thing he was built to do. He called it in. Not 911 with sirens. The Cobb County non-emergency line, which he had saved in his phone the week he moved in, because of course he did. I've heard the recording. The whole county has better things to archive. But I asked, and Detective Alvarez let me listen once, and I will hear it for the rest of my life. This is Colonel Darnell Reeves, United States Marine Corps, retired. I have 2 unaccompanied minors at my residence, dropped by taxi. Parents are unreachable and out of state. Children are safe with me on the porch. I need an officer and family services. No lights, no rush. That's it. That was the single phone call my brother never saw coming. No anger in it. No drama. Just procedure. The one force of nature my family had never once met. Because for 30 years I had stood between them and it, absorbing it, softening it, billing nobody. There was no one standing in the doorway anymore. There was only the doorway. The rest of that morning unfolded the way institutions unfold. Slowly, then all at once, with paperwork. A patrol officer arrived at 9:20 and took the porch scene in. 2 towel-wrapped kids eating graham crackers, a retired colonel standing easy, a doorbell camera blinking over all of it. A family services caseworker named Ms. Okafor arrived within the hour, crouched to Caleb's eye level, and admired Bruce the dinosaur with complete professional sincerity. Dispatch raised City Star Cab. The company pulled the trip sheet and found Gus, who confirmed it all before his shift even ended. Cash fare, 2 minors, no adult at pickup destination confirmed. Quote, the dad said their aunt was expecting them. The officer ran the address history. The county ran me. That's the part people don't think about. I wasn't hiding from anyone with a badge, only from my relatives, and a records clerk found in 40 minutes what my own mother hadn't noticed in 4 months. 2 calls went to my silenced phone, sitting in a drawer in Decatur under a coffee mug. Meanwhile, Zoe sat very straight on my old porch swing. The officer told me this later, and it's the detail that still gets me. Answering every question in full sentences, keeping her brother's hand in hers, being 9 years old and the most responsible Stanton at the scene by a comfortable margin. At noon, I called the number back, standing at my kitchen counter, rain running down the window. A woman answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Stanton, Detective Alvarez, Cobb County. Do you know a Zoe and a Caleb Stanton?" I said yes. She said, "They're safe. They're at 4128 Maplewood Court. I think you'd better come out here." The floor tilted very quietly under everything I owned. I said I could be there in 25 minutes, and I drove into the storm. There is no manual for parking across the street from your own house. The magnolia I'd planted was dark with rain. The porch light I'd wired glowed for somebody else. I crossed the yard I used to mow and climbed 3 steps I could have climbed blind and stood on my own welcome mat as a visitor. And before I touched the bell, the door opened, because the colonel had seen me coming the way he apparently saw everything coming. Caleb hit me at knee height and held on like weather. Zoe walked over slower, checking my face first. Checking, I realized whether I was about to be one more adult who needed managing, then folded into my side without a word. Over their heads, Detective Alvarez introduced herself, flipped a page, and asked the question the entire rest of my life now divides around. "Mr. Stanton, were you expecting these children today?" I want to be honest about that moment, because this is the part I'd want someone to be honest with me about. I saw the exit. One yes, one small, merciful yes. A mix-up, my brother's hopeless with dates. And the machinery around that porch would have powered down on the spot. No report, no charges. Say it, and I could carry the whole thing on my back to somewhere quiet and bury it, the way I had buried 30 years of smaller versions of it. The yes was right there in my mouth, warm and familiar, tasting like every Thanksgiving I'd ever cooked. I looked at Zoe's wet braid. I heard my own final text, the one sleeping in the phone in my pocket. And I said, "No." I refused. 3 times. In writing. Alvarez wrote without looking down. Ms. Okafor asked if I'd take the children while the situation resolved, and I said yes to that instantly, because the kids were never the load. The load was everything bolted to them. Kinship placement, they call it. A background check, some signatures, a caseworker's walkthrough of my condo, and by 7 that evening there were grilled cheese sandwiches and cartoons in a home my family didn't know existed. Caleb was asleep by 8:30, Bruce the dinosaur standing guard on the pillow. Zoe helped me wash dishes because she is constitutionally unable to be a guest, and somewhere between plates, she said, not looking at me, "Why didn't you tell us you moved?" There are questions that are really doors, and behind that one was a hallway I wasn't ready for. I said something true and useless about grown-up problems. She nodded the way kids nod when they've clocked that you flinched, and dried her hands, and delivered the second question like it weighed nothing at all. "Dad said you'd never say no for real. He says your no's are just how you warm up." She said it without cruelty. That was the horror of it. She said it like a fact she'd been handed with her cereal. One more law of the universe. Water is wet, Tuesdays are library day, Aunt Kendra's no means keep pushing. The machine wasn't just running me anymore, it was already training her, teaching a 9-year-old girl by demonstration exactly how much a woman's refusal is worth in our family, which is to say nothing, a coupon, an opening bid. I tucked her in and sat on my balcony in the wet dark for a long time. For 2 more days, the ocean kept my brother safe from his own phone while his children slept down my hall, and a county file with his name on it thickened quietly on a desk in Marietta. Monday afternoon, the ship reached Nassau, and 40 minutes after the gangway touched the pier, my phone rang. 19 missed calls were waiting for Darren when his phone found a Bahamian signal, mine, Brianna's mother's, and a Cobb County number that had left instructions. He didn't call the detective first, he didn't call his children. He called me, and the first words out of my brother's mouth, verbatim, because I will never forget them. "What did you do?" Not, Are the kids okay? Not. Oh my God. What happened? 10 days of his own decisions had just landed on him, and his instinct, honed by a lifetime of soft landings, was to locate the person whose job was to absorb it. I stood on my balcony and kept my voice level. I answered a question honestly. You should try it before you land. He came apart then. In pieces I could hear reshuffling, bluster, then bargaining, then the voice he'd used at 9 years old when a window got broken. It was a misunderstanding. I obviously would have never. They said, what charge? Behind him, sharp as glass even over cheap ship Wi-Fi, I heard Brianna. She never said yes? Darren, look at me. She never said yes? And I understood that 2 investigations had just opened on that boat, and only one of them involved the police. The detective had told him, politely, that he needed to present himself in Georgia. The cruise line's refund policy told him the rest. They flew out of Nassau the next morning, seats bought at desperation prices, and I did the arithmetic I do for a living and found it almost elegant. The man who spent $4,800 to escape a babysitting fee was now paying panic prices to fly home into a warrant. Quick pause, because I can feel some of you yelling at your screens. Put yourself on that porch with Detective Alvarez for 1 second. One little yes from you and your family's whole problem evaporates. One honest no, and your brother lands in handcuffs. Which word would you have said? Truly. Be honest with me in the comments. I read all of them. And if you're new here, subscribe. Because we are just now getting to the part where my mother slides a piece of paper across a kitchen table. Tuesday, July 15th, was supposed to be my exam day. Instead, I deferred my seat to the August sitting, the first cost of all this that could be measured in dollars. And I was pouring cereal for Caleb when Darren's flight touched down at Hartsfield-Jackson. 2 officers were waiting on the jet bridge. The warrant had been signed the day before. Abandonment of a dependent child and contributing to the deprivation of a minor, misdemeanors both, built on a foundation my brother had poured himself. The driver's statement, the trip sheet, the colonel's doorbell camera, which had recorded the cab pulling away into the rain, and the timestamps. Those quiet little assassins. A cab dispatched at 7:38, a text to me at 7:41. He'd told me after the wheels were rolling, then made himself unreachable for a week. Intent, the law calls that. Tuesday, my family called it something else, because that same afternoon, my mother drove past Maplewood Court, to look at the house, she said, to feel close to the situation, and saw a gray pickup in my driveway, and a small Marine Corps flag by my door. She called me from the curb, and I will give her this. She has a gift for compression. 2 sentences, and the whole family cosmology snapped into place. You sold the house? You let a stranger arrest your brother? I stood very still and admired the engineering. In one breath, the sale of my own property had become a betrayal. A retired Marine answering his own doorbell had become my hired accomplice, and Darren, who had shipped his children across a county to an unverified address and gone dark, had been arrested by me. Grammar is destiny in my family. The verbs always find their way to my name. I said, Mom, ask me how the kids are. She hung up. The family group chat is called Stanton Strong. That night it earned the name. 84 messages between dinner and midnight, and I read every one, standing in my kitchen while the kids slept, watching my trial conducted in a courtroom where I had no seat. Aunt Renee opened proceedings. Blood doesn't call the police on blood, period. A cousin I hadn't seen since a funeral supplied case law. She could have just taken the kids? They're her niece and nephew. My mother posted a photograph of Darren at his high school graduation, which is apparently what passes for exculpatory evidence. My father posted nothing, which in that chat is a verdict too. Here is what nobody posted not once in 84 messages: a question about the children, whether Zoe was sleeping okay, whether Caleb was scared, whether 2 kids who'd stood in the rain on a stranger's porch might need anything at all from this enormous concerned family. The kids weren't the story. The kids were props in the story of what I had done to Darren. 2 messages did come to me privately. The first was from Brianna, and I've kept it. He told me you said yes. He told his lawyer that too, until the texts came out. I'm so sorry. The kids ask about you. The one honest adult on that side of the ledger, and she'd married in. Not one drop of Stanton blood, which was starting to feel less like a coincidence and more like a diagnosis. The second was a phone call from my father that lasted under a minute. Frank Stanton, a man of few words and fewer positions, said, "Your mother's heart is breaking, Kendra." That was it. That was the whole call. 30 seconds of dial tone in my chest where a question about my heart might have gone. The following Tuesday, my mother called with a voice I hadn't heard since childhood fevers. Warm, syrupy, mobilized. "Come for tea, baby. Just us." I drove the 30 minutes to Marietta knowing full well that just us was a genre, not a guest list, and sure enough, my father's truck was in the drive and the good tablecloth was out. On the kitchen table, squared between the sugar bowl and a plate of shortbread like it had a place setting of its own, sat a document. 3 pages. A little tab, printed by someone's lawyer, marking where my signature would go. Darren's attorney had found the door out, and the door was me. If there had been a standing childcare arrangement, an understanding, reached in the spring, that Aunt Kendra would take the kids. And if I had then moved without informing the family, well, then nobody abandoned anyone. Then it's all a tragic mix-up between siblings, the charges soften or evaporate, and everyone gets their life back. All it required was for me to swear, under oath, to 2 lies. That I had said yes when I had said no 3 times in writing, and that the secret I'd kept for my own survival had been the negligence that caused it all. My mother poured tea and slid the pages across the table with 2 fingers, gently, the way you'd push a gift. "One signature, baby. You could fix this whole family with 1 sentence." I looked at the tab marking the line where my name was supposed to go. I price risk for a living, and I have never in my career seen an instrument like it. A policy where I paid every premium, absorbed every loss, and the beneficiary was the very hazard being insured. I didn't touch it, but God help me, I didn't say no yet either. I said I'd read it. You should know I almost signed it. 3 nights later, at 3 in the morning, I sat at my kitchen counter with the affidavit on my laptop screen and did the thing I have done my entire life. I started drafting the version where I absorb it. I actually typed it out, the spring conversation that never happened, the yes I never gave. And it flowed, because I've been ghostwriting this family's alibis since I was 12. Then I opened my texts and read my own final answer, dated July 5th, and underneath the ache I felt my profession clear its throat. Look at the exposure, Kendra. His charges were misdemeanors. False statements under oath, in Georgia, is a felony. The math wasn't subtle. They were asking me to trade a possible probation sentence for him against a possible prison sentence for me, my license, my career, my name, and calling that trade family. I deleted the draft. And sitting there in the dark, I finally let myself replay the call I'd taken the night of his arrest. The automated recording from the county jail, my brother waiting on bond, my thumb hovering a long second before I accepted the charges. That night, for the first time in 37 years, Darren had spoken to me without charm, in a voice with a crack straight down the middle. Nobody ever let me fail, Kay, not once. Do you understand that? I didn't know a no could be real. I had sat with my hand over my mouth, exactly the way I was sitting now. It was the truest sentence he'd ever said to me, and the most damning thing anyone has ever said about our family, and he'd meant it as an excuse. He was not a monster. He was a man raised on a diet of rescues, staring at consequence like it was a species he'd read about but never seen. I heard him. I even believed him, and I had not offered to catch him, and hanging up had felt like setting down something I'd carried so long my arms had forgotten they were arms. I needed one conversation with a human being who shared no blood with anyone in this story. So Saturday morning I drove to Maplewood Court and knocked on my old door on purpose for the first time. Colonel Reeves didn't act surprised. He brought out 2 mugs of coffee, and we sat on the porch, him in a rocker, me on the swing I'd hung for Zoe, which he had left exactly where it was. I apologized for dragging a stranger into my family's mess, and he looked genuinely puzzled by the shape of the sentence. "Ma'am, I didn't unleash anything, I just answered the door." He let that sit, then walked me through his 20 minutes on this porch like an after-action review. The calls, the voicemail, the decision. Not to defend himself, since it never occurred to him he needed defending, but because he could see I needed the timeline of the day my family broke, narrated by somebody with no stake in the myth. Then he told me one thing about himself, unprompted, over the rim of his mug. He had a son. There'd been a stretch, the son's 30th year, money and worse, when everyone told him to step in, wire the money, make the calls, catch the boy. "Hardest order I ever gave myself was stand down," he said. "My wife didn't speak to me for a month." A long sip. "He runs an aircraft hangar in Pensacola now. Calls me every Sunday. He didn't tell me what to do. Men like that don't." He handed me a single data point from the far side of the exact canyon I was standing in, and let me do my own math. When I left, the affidavit was still in my bag, unsigned. The family meeting, though the summons hadn't officially come yet, was 8 days out, and for the first time I wasn't afraid of what I could feel assembling. The summons came Thursday, by phone, in my mother's chairwoman voice. Sunday, 2 o'clock. The whole family, her house. "And Kendra, bring your signature or don't bother coming at all." There it was, finally, out loud. The price tag my whole childhood had been trying to read. My seat at that table had never been furniture. It was a lease, and the rent was due, and the rent was me. My father got on the line for exactly one sentence, the longest speech he'd given all year. "Your mother needs this, Kendra." Her need. His peace. Darren's freedom. Everyone's arithmetic on the table except mine. And, as ever, not one word about the two smallest people in the family, as if the case were about a scheduling mix-up and not about children in the rain. I hung up and looked at my calendar, where 2 appointments now sat stacked on consecutive days like a controlled experiment. Sunday, 2 p.m. Family meeting, Marietta. Monday, 9:30 a.m. Interview, District Attorney's Office, where Detective Alvarez had asked me to confirm my statement for the file. 2 tables, 2 days apart. On one of them I could say the sentence my mother wanted. On the other I would say the sentence that was true. The same mouth could not visit both. I did what I do at work when a client is about to make a catastrophic decision politely. I stopped arguing with the weather and started modeling it. I put the affidavit in my bag. Unsigned because you carry the exhibit, you don't become it. And I spent Friday being extremely good at my job, and Saturday I sat down at my kitchen table with a legal pad and I ran the last risk assessment I would ever run for the Stanton family. 2 columns, 1 legal pad, my whole life. Column A, I sign. Darren walks. My mother hugs me at Thanksgiving and tells the story forever about how family closed ranks. And underneath, in the fine print where I live, a felony writing my name like a lien that never expires, my career 1 records request away from Ash, and a 9-year-old girl downstream of it all, learning her final lesson on the subject. That Aunt Kendra's no melted, in the end. Exactly like Dad always said it would. That a woman's refusal in this family is a bluff you simply have to outlast. Column B. I don't sign. The truth stands where the Colonel left it, in the doorway. My brother eats a misdemeanor he cooked himself. And I lose the table. Not dramatically. Nobody would post a banishment notice. But I knew the mechanics. The Sunday invitations would just stop. The story would calcify with me as the villain, and my mother's voice would become a thing I remembered instead of a thing I heard. I sat there a long time looking for column C. I'm good at column C. I have spent my entire life building column C for other people out of my own hours, my own savings, my own address. There was no column C this time. That's what made it the first honest decision the Stanton family had faced in decades. It had a price no matter who paid, and for once the question was only whether the bill would finally go to the person who'd run up the tab. I put down the pen. I slept, to my surprise, like a stone. Sunday, At 2 o'clock exactly, I knocked on the door of the house I grew up in. 11 people were already seated. The paper lay in the middle of the table like a knife set for dinner. They had staged it with real care, and I noticed the staging the way you notice a rigged scale. The photo albums were out and open. Darren's christening, Darren's graduation, the two of us at the lake in matching windbreakers, aged 9 and 6, which is a coincidence of numbers I refuse to believe my mother missed. Zoe and Caleb were not there. They'd been sent to a neighbor's, because this was grown folks' business, which tells you everything about how my family defines the word, since the entire case was 2 children the grown folks had misplaced. 11 people ringed that living room. My parents, Aunt Renee with her reading glasses on, holding printouts. Cousins deployed on the couch like jurors. Darren, out on bond, scrubbed and contrite in a collared shirt I'd bet money his lawyer chose. And Brianna, sitting apart, near the window, with her purse on her lap like a woman at a bus stop deciding on a destination. The pen was already on the table, parallel to the affidavit, 1 inch of ceremonial distance between them. My mother opened with the albums, a guided tour of everything we owed each other, narrated in her softest voice. Then Darren stood and read an apology off his phone. It was smooth. It ran almost 2 minutes. And if you graphed it, as I did, every sentence bent to the same load-bearing beam. I'm sorry you felt unheard. I'm sorry this got so big. But we both know. And here, he looked up, and gave me the smile that has closed car sales across 3 counties. We both know you were always going to say yes. You're you. The room actually murmured in agreement, warm as a church. That was the pitch. My own reliability, 30 years of it, offered back to me as the evidence that my refusal had never been real, the fire presenting the fire department as proof there was never any danger. I sat with my hands folded and let the silence get expensive. Then my mother slid the paper the last 12 inches, and the room leaned in. I didn't raise my voice. I want that on the record. Whatever else the family says about that afternoon, because the room got loud, and none of the loud was mine. I took out my phone, opened the thread, and read aloud. Dates first, like citations. June 26th. I am not available to watch the kids July 11th through the 19th. July 1st. The same, with my exam date. July 5th. This is my final answer. Then I set the phone face up beside the pen. Those were sent before he ever bought a cab ride. The detective has them. The DA has them. You've all had 30 years of me. You know I document. My mother's hand covered the affidavit like a woman shielding a candle. I kept my voice at kitchen table volume. You are asking me to swear under oath that my no was a yes. His charges are misdemeanors. Lying in that document is a felony. You want to trade his probation for my prison and call the exchange rate family. Aunt Renee started to say blood, and I let the word hang there unfed. Then my mother broke. Really broke. Her voice climbing to somewhere I'd never heard it. 1 sentence, Kendra. You could fix all of it with 1 sentence. And there it was. The family thesis, stated cleanly at last. Any wreckage, any size, and the repair is always 1 more sentence of mine, 1 more yes from the department of me. I stood up. My knees held. For 34 years, my no was an opening bid in this family. It stopped being won on a porch, in the rain. I looked at Darren, who was looking at the carpet. I've done the math on what this costs me. I'm the only person in this room who ever does the math. I know exactly what I'm losing today, and I am not signing. I picked up my bag. Behind me, my mother's voice went flat and final, the coldest I have ever heard it. If you walk out that door, don't come back Sunday. Any Sunday. I stopped in the doorway of the house I grew up in. The last doorway that had never once been mine, and I gave the truest answer of my life. I know, Mom. I priced it in. And I walked through it, into the afternoon, and the door I heard close behind me was so much quieter than I'd spent 3 decades fearing it would be. Monday, 9:30 a.m., a conference room with county carpet and coffee I didn't drink. Detective Alvarez, an assistant district attorney, my statement in a folder, And me. It took 40 minutes. I confirmed everything, dates and screenshots, in the level voice I use for board presentations. 3 refusals in writing. No arrangement. No misunderstanding. A text sent after the cab was already rolling. When they asked if I wanted to add anything, I said one thing for the record and meant every word of it. I'm not here to bury my brother. I'm declining to lie for him. Those are different jobs, and I've retired from both. The ADA almost smiled. Then I asked my only question. The one nobody at that Sunday table had asked out loud even once. What happens to the children's file? Ms. Okafor's report, they told me. Safety plan in place, kids stable with their mother, case on track to close if it held. Kids doing fine, kids asking to see their aunt. I signed where signing was true, and walked out into July sunlight feeling neither triumphant nor destroyed, but accurate. The way a ledger feels when it finally balances after years of somebody cooking it. In the parking garage, I did the last piece of business. I opened Stanton Strong, 84 messages of my own trial still hanging there unanswered, scrolled to the bottom, and pressed the button the app keeps in the corner for exactly this. Leave group. No speech, no parting shot. 34 years of standing between my family and every consequence they'd ever ordered, and my old life didn't end with thunder or a slammed door. It ended in a concrete stairwell with one tap, quieter than a text arriving. It ended the way the truth arrives. Somebody just answers the door. In September, Darren took the deal his lawyer built once the affidavit strategy died on my mother's table. Guilty to 1 misdemeanor count, contributing to the deprivation of a minor. 12 months of probation, a parenting course, court-ordered. 80 hours of community service, some of it. The universe writes its own jokes, at a youth shelter. No jail beyond the night of the jet bridge. He kept custody. Ms. Okafor's safety plan is running its 6 quiet months and is on track to close clean, which I genuinely count as good news, because whatever else is true, Zoe and Caleb love their father. The dealership was less forgiving than the court. You cannot run a sales floor while on probation for a crime with the word minor in it, corporate said, and Darren came off management, and the pay cut had teeth. My parents covered his legal bills, $9,000 I heard through Brianna, which broke my heart in a way I'd stopped expecting. Even now, even after all of it, the reflex held, catch him, always catch him, and mail the lesson to whoever's paying attention, because it was never going to be him. The force I grew up under didn't die that summer. It just lost one particular address. As for me, my mother kept her word, which I respect in a bleak sort of way. No more Sundays. The invitations simply stopped, the way I'd modeled on my legal pad, and at church her version travels well, the daughter who chose strangers over blood. But on the last Saturday of September, Brianna texted me a park name and a time, no committee, no permission slip. Caleb brought Bruce, Zoe brought the chessboard, and I brought nothing at all, for once in my life. Except one thing I'd already set in motion that nobody at that Sunday table knew about. They still don't. You're about to. The week after I left the group chat, I sat down with the attorney who'd handled my closing and moved a piece of the Maplewood money where my family's weather can never reach it. 2 529 education accounts. One for Zoe, one for Caleb, seeded from the sale of the house their grandmother called communal, topped by an automatic $200 each, every month, drafted the same day Meridian pays me. Brianna is the only adult on that side who knows, and she carries the secret on one condition, my only term in the whole arrangement. The grandparents never hear of it. That condition isn't spite, it's engineering. The moment my mother learns there's a fund, it becomes the family's fund, and then it becomes leverage. And I have watched what this family does with pooled resources my entire life. I was the pooled resource. This money doesn't negotiate. It doesn't attend Sunday dinner. It just compounds, quietly, the way consequences do. And there's one more line item, in the front pocket of Zoe's backpack, laminated, where a 9-year-old who checks things can always check it, is a card with my number and a promise in plain block letters. If you are ever stranded, call this number, a car will come. Aunt Kay. She's used it once so far. Not stranded. She called to report a chess opening she'd found on YouTube. The car came anyway. We got milkshakes. That's the whole story of the fund. Love, converted from something they could bill against into something I get to give. It's October now. Most Sunday mornings you can find me on a porch in Smyrna that used to be mine, drinking coffee with a retired colonel who charges no rent for it and never mentions the debt, because there isn't one. He never let me thank him past the first attempt. I just answered the door, he says, and waves it off, and rocks. I passed the August exam. The plate on my office door says Director of Risk, and the first framed thing I hung was nothing from Maplewood at all. It's a crayon drawing of a porch in the rain that Zoe made for me, with a stick figure holding an umbrella over two smaller ones, and if she meant the colonel or meant me, I've decided never to ask. My phone stays quiet most weekends. There was a time that particular silence would have had me pacing, running scenarios, drafting apologies for storms I hadn't caused. In my family, silence was never peace. I told you that at the beginning, and it was true my whole life. It isn't true anymore. These days the quiet is just quiet. Weather, off duty. A no, at rest. Here is what I finally understand, and it only costs everything to learn. Nobody ever let my brother fail, so he never learned to stand, and everybody let me carry, so I never learned I was allowed to set things down. And family, it turns out, was never the people who share your blood. Family is the people who hear your no the first time you say it, and who would rather stand beside you in the rain than send you out into it. That's my story. 3 no's in writing, 1 taxi in the rain, 1 phone call from a stranger who owed me nothing and still gave my niece and nephew a dry porch. If someone in your life treats your no like an opening bid, take this as your sign to stop negotiating. Share this video with someone who needs it today, drop a comment below, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.